Good morning and welcome to webinar Biobanks in Lithuania and Sweden, cooperation between science and businesses. This webinar is organized by Enterprise Lithuania and the Embassy of Sweden in Lithuania, in partnership with Lithuanian Biotechnology Association. Today we have representatives from biobanks and businesses who will share their experience in biobanking, both Sweden and Lithuania, as well as they will discuss benefits and challenges related to cooperation between biobanks, research, and industry. As this event is held online, I would like to ask all participants to make sure that their microphones are muted during the event. And if you will have any questions for the speakers, please address them at the comment section. I would like to notify that this event is recorded. So let's start. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency, Ambassador of Sweden to Lithuania, Inger Buxton, to open this event. Good morning, Ambassador. Sorry, just 1 second, we cannot hear you.
There we are.
Good morning.
You can hear me now?
Yes,
Good.
perfectly.
Yes. Thank you so much, Agnes. I would also like to warmly welcome you all to this webinar today. And also I would like to start by thanking the co-hosts, Enterprise Lithuania and the Lithuanian Biotechnology Association, to co-organize this webinar together with us. Sweden and Lithuania are both strongly committed to the development of the life science sectors in the respective country. Be it on policy, science or industrial level. I'm proud to acknowledge that Sweden is known as the most dynamic market for life science in Northern Europe, with a strong focus on innovation and co-creation. Sweden gathers entrepreneurs, multinational companies and scientists for joint solutions on today's health challenges. In Lithuania, I'm happy to note that life science sector is gaining prominence and accelerating faster than almost anywhere else in Europe. Already in 2015, Sweden Bio, the Swedish life science organization, and Enterprise Lithuania signed a memorandum of understanding to facilitate collaboration between life science research centers and industries in our two respective countries. Since then, I believe our two countries have established a firm cooperation in this area. And with today's webinar, we are taking another important step to further enhance this cooperation. Together with some prominent experts from our two countries, we will focus on one specific topic today within the wider field of life science, which is biobanking, and how biobanks and business can cooperate. Biobanks are platforms and infrastructures where academia, industry, and healthcare interested in collaboration can meet in order to fully utilize the potential of valuable medical data. And I'm proud to say that Sweden has good conditions and a good climate for research and clinical trials, including human biological samples. There are national quality registers, national health data registers, and biobanks with millions of samples that can be used for research. Clearly, these are all valuable assets for healthcare providers, researchers, and universities, and foremost in the long run for patients. Through collaboration, companies can gain access to a combination of samples from a biobank and use these assets to speed up the development of new drugs, diagnostical tools, and so on. To make it easier to get an overview of existing data and samples and to facilitate the collaboration, certain organizations offer infrastructures and access points. And one such institution offering efficient infrastructure for biobanking is Karolinska Institutet, Biobank. Therefore, I'm delighted to have with us today Executive Director of Karolinska Institutet Biobank, Dr. Mark Divers. who has kindly agreed to share his experience and views on this important topic. Furthermore, we will also get the opportunity to listen to an example of how Swedish business collaborates with biobanks. And I'm pleased, therefore, that Dr. Michael Dabrowski at the Swedish company Pelago Bioscience is joining us here today. So let me finish here by wishing you all a fruitful and inspiring discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for kind words and for welcoming everyone and opening this webinar. I would like to invite Managing Director at Enterprise Lithuania, Daina Kleponė, to give a short introduction to Lithuanian Science and Business Partnership in the life science industry. Good morning, Daina.
Good morning, Agne. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Your Excellency Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you are doing very well and you are all negative, and I wish you to stay negative. And it's great to speak with you all today. And before, I would like to briefly introduce Enterprise Lithuania. We are a government agency, and basically what we do, we help our businesses to grow. And our strategic goal is to promote the development of a high value added businesses in Lithuania. And while facilitating connections between science and business, we took a bold action to start the Life Science Baltic Forums. I hope all you know about this forum. And it was started back in 2012. Now it has grown to the biggest event in Eastern and Central Europe, and it's dedicated exceptionally for life sciences experts from all around the world. And when I am asked about innovation ecosystems, I like to say that the stable innovation ecosystem has to have kind of a 4 legs or four driving forces. And it's infrastructure, talents, commitment from business, and commitment from government, of course. But I was forgetting one very, actually the most important, not material force, and it's a collaboration. Collaboration between researchers and businesses is essential for the advancement of the healthcare. And it also acts as a driving force for the development of the biotechnological innovations. Global Competitiveness Index has ranked collaboration in Lithuania between Lithuanian industry and universities in R&D first in the Central and Eastern European region. And the biotech sector is an example for other industries on how two separate elements of academia and business can be combined into the science and business model. So talking about biobanking, it's a relatively young field in Lithuania, thus it has its great potential for cooperation. And I believe that if exploited further, biobanking could benefit not only for patients, but also could be a valuable asset for businesses. And as we know, many biobank projects are being implemented in Lithuanian medical institutions and for scientific purposes. And it will be very interesting to hear today whether there are already some projects with the businesses, or maybe they are hindered by the legal framework or some other problems. So I think that it's important to continue discussions on what are the best strategies to encourage the further collaboration between science and business, which would translate into the tangible outcome, what we all wish. And I'm very glad today that we will hear the experience of the leaders of the biobank sector. It's Karolinska Institutet Biobank and the company Pelago Bioscience that will share their stories. So I'm very, very keen to listen now for the discussion, and I wish everybody a very fruitful time and very fruitful discussion and insightful exchange of practices and ideas. Thank you very much, Agne.
Thank you very much, Daina, for a very good introduction moving forward to the discussion. So we won't hold on any minute, and I would like to introduce our speakers in the discussion today. Dr. Mark Divers is an Executive Director at Karolinska Institutet Biobank in Sweden. Good morning, Dr. Divers. Can we hear you?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the introduction.
I also would like to introduce Dr. Michael Dabrowski, CEO of Pelago Bioscience, a company from Sweden. Good morning. I'm just checking the microphones if everyone's working. So, yes.
And mine is working too. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. I would like to introduce Dr. Živile Gudlevičienė, who is the senior scientist and head of Biobank at National Cancer Institute in Lithuania. Good morning, Živile.
Good morning to everybody. Thank you for inviting.
Good morning. And last but not least, Daniel Naumovas, who is the head of Biobank at Vilnius University Hospital Santaros Klinikos. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning. Hi.
Good morning. It's good to hear that we can hear everyone. So I would like to start with each of you to have a short introduction of your facilities that you operate in, and starting with Dr. Divers, if you could share and introduce Karolinska Institute Biobank, its activities, some histories, challenges, collaborations that you have. Just a short introduction would be perfect background for the discussion further.
Thank you, Agne. Yes, it would be a pleasure. And it's a pleasure to take part in this activity today. Real pleasure. About 5 years ago, I made a visit to Vilnius Hospital to discuss this kind of thing and the importance of biobanking. So it's very nice to take part in today's session. And I hope you'll realize I'm a strong believer in the value and power of biobanks. Agne, you asked me to introduce the biobank I work at, so I'll do that now and get right to the heart of it. The biobank I work at is a university integrated biobank. I use that term because it is. In biobanking spheres, we hear a lot about hospital integrated biobanking, which is probably the most common type of biobanking. Human samples that are used for medical research or even for therapy are generally generated in the hospital environment. So most biobanks, I think, in the world, most medical biobanks are in a hospital environment. The one that I work for is a little bit unusual. I would argue it's unique in Sweden in being a university integrated biobank. And it's probably a consequence of the fact that Karolinska Institutet is a university that is entirely devoted to medicine. That in itself is relatively unusual. There aren't so many in the world. And KI is certainly the biggest medical university in Sweden. And about 15, 16 years ago, Karolinska Institutet realized that it needed to get more active in this area for a number of reasons. And it was then that the decision was made strategically to form a centralized biobank within the university. The mandate or the purpose was to serve medical research and to do it in a way that was completely compliant with the law, of course. Every biobank knows about that. Back then, this was a time when Sweden was introducing a dedicated biobank law, the Swedish Biobank Act. And Karolinska Institute realized that many, if not most of its medical researchers who had clinical activities were already collecting human samples either for their research or for other purposes. And it also realized that it was going to be a challenge to coordinate that, to be certain it was compliant with the law. And for a Swedish authority not to be compliant with law is not an option. So it was a smart decision back in 2004, I think it was, when KI decided to form its dedicated biobank. complying with the law is one thing, and all of us need to do that. But the real purpose of KI Biobank was to provide as a core facility, a central core facility in the university, services to medical researchers who wanted to use human samples. And that's what we do today. And over the years, we've grown those services to include everything to do with collecting and handling human samples, and not just from patients, also from apparently healthy volunteers in so-called prospective cohorts. And over the years, we've also developed our own technological platforms to be able to do that, and realized that those are useful services for others to use. So we now have quite a wide range of data services, data handling services related to biobanks that we offer to the researchers of the universities. The biobank itself became rather quickly rather successful, and I'm not boasting here. I wasn't part of it at that time. I've been in the head of this biobank for 11 years. The person who started it, I think, Gunnel Tubering, deserves full praise for the great job she did. It turned out to be very successful and very popular with medical researchers in the university. And it began attracting attention from other people, other actors. And we now also serve a number of companies and provide them with a number of our services. That's the way we operate. When I came in about 11 years ago, I was really intrigued to learn about how the biobank was working, and very quickly saw, to my great pleasure, that it was having an impact. The reason for doing medical research is to try and improve medical practice, clinical practice, and improve public health. And what I saw amongst the research studies using the biobank was evidence that some of them were starting to indeed have that impact. Among the first example I saw was some studies based on or built around multiple sclerosis that had been collecting samples with our biobank. And now today we probably have samples from about 30 to 50% of Swedish MS patients. And MS, as you might know, is a disease that's more predominant in the Nordic countries. So Sweden has been a very active player in medical research in this area. And what I discovered when I was coming into the biobank new was I met one of these researchers, a rather charismatic and sometimes lively person who was full of strong opinions and enormous energy. And he pushed this work very far. And what I saw was a great example, for me, a very early example of what today we'd call precision medicine. The fact that they had so many samples from a significant proportion of the patient population in Sweden allowed them to do tests that covered that population, and in this particular case was looking at a new drug treatment that was very promising but had a number of side effects. With the biobank here at this university, they were able to test those side effects and pick out the patients who would gain all the benefit for the drug and none of the side effects, and at the same time exclude those patients who they could clearly see were going to suffer bad side effects, side effects that in some cases risk death. This actually rescued the drug. The drug was looking like being a failure and being completely rejected. On the basis of this research, it got rescued and became a very helpful weapon in the arsenal against multiple sclerosis. That was one example that went on to foster quite a series of drug trials in multiple sclerosis. I saw more and more examples, and we have a list of them associated with our biobank, not the least of which is in prostate cancer and breast cancer. And these are research studies that are doing more than just generating research publications in prestigious journals. They are genuinely either already transforming clinical practice or they're on the point of doing that. And this is the kind of thing we want biobanks to do. This is something I have a passion for, which is why I'm pleased to take part in the session today. I think with that, I'll close for now, Agne, and look forward to participating in the discussion.
Thank you. It's very pleasant to hear that the biobanks based in university, they increase the effectiveness, the results of research that is done by university. So the examples that you shared is really impressive, and I'm looking forward to the discussion and discussing and probably looking for sharing of some experiences and challenges, how you overcame these, because your biobank has a lot of years of experience in this field. I would like to move on to Dr. Dabrowski from Pelago Bioscience and ask him to do a short introduction of the company of Pelago Bioscience and what does this company do and how it benefits with collaboration with biobanks. Michael.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Michael and I represent Pelago Bioscience. We are a contract research organization, so we serve other research organizations and our customers are the organizations that develop new pharmaceutical or new medicine. From the very small ones, which are completely virtual, does not have their own laboratory operations, to the largest, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, GSK, etc. And what we do is we quantify if the intended drug candidate reaches its target of action. And that's nothing new, but it's the second part of the equation, which is extremely important when you develop a new drug. Obviously, it needs to be safe, but it also needs, of course, to be effective. And in order for a drug to have its intended effect, it of course needs to reach its intended target, whether that is in a particular cell, in a particular organ, but certainly also if it hits the intended target protein. And it's that interaction that we measure. We measure if the drug binds to the protein, both the intended protein, but we can also measure if it binds to other proteins. So that allows our customers to focus on the right candidates, the ones that have a chance of becoming medicine because they actually hit their intended target. Before doing that, I worked for AstraZeneca for many years, and before that Novo Nordisk. So I've always been in the drug discovery industry, and with a view to apply the science and apply the science for better human health. So that's when someone asks me for opinions and thoughts about biobanks, and my natural response is yes. Although I'm not even an expert. No, I can spell biobanks, but that's probably the extent of it. However, those collections of samples, whether it's from prospective cohorts, like Mark said, or patients, are of course extremely important for our customers because they develop medicine for humans. For Pelago itself, well, access to biobanks or knowledge of their existence is important because we can then advise our customers. The ideal experiment when you develop a new drug is of course to test your hypothesis in a patient. Now that's not possible. Well, a human sample of sort is much better, and the method that we use at Pelago can be used on such samples. So we are a natural customer at biobanks for, well, on behalf of our customers. So therefore knowledge on what's available is important for Pelago. We haven't had direct interactions with Swedish biobanks, but we've had it with a hospital clinic in Denmark, for instance, working on childhood leukemia. And there, an aspect of the biobank which is important is the fact that you get access to annotated samples. There is a history to it. Of course, it's not important who the person is, and that's fine. But the annotation of the disease state or the progression state was very important, and allowed us in that study to find potential markers for cellular toxicity. Of course, if you treat leukemia patients, then what you do is, in fact, you kill cells, so you give poison. But in childhood leukemia, there are situations where these damages, and in particular neurological damages, are prohibitive of giving the optimal treatment. So finding early markers of potential neurotoxicity will advance the clinical field to allow better treatments of candidates. So, I mean, those kind of examples, what Mark told you just about MS, I think is really important and really enough said about how the drug developers and the biobanks could and should increase their collaborations. So therefore, again, another argument for this type of networking between businesses and biobanks. I think that I'll stop there.
Thank you, Michael, so much for sharing your experiences. And as we finished talking about biobanks that collect cancer samples, cancer-related samples, so I will move to Dr. Živilė Gudlevičienė, who is a head of Biobank at National Cancer Institute, a biobank that is specialized specifically in the cancer field. Could you please introduce your activities of your biobank?
So, dear organizers and guests, I am Dr. Živilė Gudlevičienė, how Agnes tell you, head of Biobank at National Cancer Institute of Vilnius, Lithuania. Our biobank is a hospital-based cancer tissue biobank established in 2012. First, it was only project-based biobank, but I would like to remind that new version of law for biomedical research with described rules, regulation, and activities for biobanks in Lithuania was adopted only in 2015. So our biobank in National Cancer Institute was licensed only in 2017 years. And new version of informed consent was adopted and confirmed by the Lithuanian Committee of Bioethics. So today, our patients attending for the treatment to the National Cancer Institute give us large consent to use the remaining biological material for the scientific use. And today we are so quite young biobank. What kind of biological materials we are collecting? Firstly, we collect various tumors and frozen biological samples from different kinds of tumors. Mainly it is tumor and non-tumor tissues. After that, we collect blood, serum, plasma, buffy coat cells, and urine of the same patients. And all our samples are, of course, aliquoted and stored in deep cooling freezers. Our freezers are -80 and 150 of temperature. And today we have stored more than 20,000 various samples. What our field of scientific interest? Firstly, yes, it is cryobiological research. One of our famous projects is oncofertility program for cancer patients. In the frame of this project, we are developing freezing and thawing techniques for reproductive tissues with purpose to the autotransplantation and, of course, fertility preservation of cancer patients. Second most important field is research of genetical and viral cancerogenesis. We have the biggest experience maybe in Lithuania regarding HPV research, so human papillomavirus, and some single nucleotide polymorphism research of different genes. And of course, we are providing biological material of for different scientific purposes and different researches. Who now are users of our biological material? As I told before, we are young biobanks. So today, main users of our biological material are PhD students from Vilnius University, from scientific laboratories of our National Cancer Institute, and also researchers from Life Science Center, also from Vilnius University. So maybe so short introduction about our National Cancer Institute Biobank. And later, maybe I will tell you about our new project and our new possibilities and our new hopes.
Thank you, Jivila, so much. And it's really important to understand what Jivila mentioned at the beginning, that only in 2015, was it, that Lithuania only established regulations regarding biobanks. So I will move now to Daniel Naumovas, who is head of biobank of one of the biggest university hospitals in Lithuania, Santaros Klinikos, to share this experience building this biobank according to the regulations that were established just recently. And how does it work, and how big is the bank currently? And could you do this introduction?
Hello. So I am Daniel, and as Agnes said, I work at Vilnius University Hospital Santaros Klinikos as a head of the biobank and also as a medical biologist. Shortly about our hospital, it was established 40 years ago, by, as the name says, Vilnius University, and also by Lithuanian Ministry of Health. And now our hospital has around 35 centers and more than 6,000 employees, of which more than 300 has PhDs and around 50 are professors. So pretty huge community of scientists, researchers, and big medical community. And our hospital, one of the amazing things that our hospital has laboratory medicine center, which combines different laboratories like laboratory of hematology, general cytology, biochemistry, microbiology, immunology, blood transfusion, and different infectious diseases like tuberculosis, and newly established COVID lab. And we are proud that we are the only hospital in Lithuania that has biosafety level 3 laboratory. Another interesting thing that we have molecular and regeneration medicine department and laboratory where our experts perform diagnostics and personalized medicine by selecting appropriate and optimal therapies based on the context of patient's genetic content or other molecular or cellular analysis. And that said, the only thing that was missing from our hospital was biobank, and our biobank is also pretty new. We are also like newbies in this field, but growing really fast, I think. And thanks to that huge number of different centers and laboratories that our hospital have, we can have a multidiscipline and different disease-oriented biobank. Right now in our biobank, mostly we collect samples from hemo-oncological patients, from COVID-19 patients, and from healthy donors. But different departments show huge interest in our biobanking activities and constantly joining our activity. And one unique aspect about our biobank is that we have tight collaboration with our tissue bank. And we can store residual samples that left after transplantation or were not used for transplantation at all. And as long as these samples were prepared according to the highest GMP and quality control standards, they can be amazing and perfect material for research. The number of samples in our biobank grows really, really quickly. Each year we collect around 10 to 20,000 of hemo-oncological samples, like serum, blood serum, or bone marrow, plasma, DNA, RNA, white blood cells, living cells, or lysed cells. And since March, we are also collecting COVID-19 samples, and we have collected more than 10,000 different samples, like nasal or oropharyngeal samples, blood serum, also DNA and virus RNA. And I believe that Santaros Klinikos Biobank played a huge role in fighting the pandemic, because samples, information, and knowledge stored in our biobank were used for such experiments as testing of fast antibody AGG or AGM tests, checking performance of different serological tests, and creating new serological tests, optimizing of group pooling PCR, and testing seroconversion of asymptomatic patients, and also sequencing SARS-CoV-2 genome. And what is really exciting, that many of our research results were also used by our health ministry to create recommendations on COVID-19 testing and diagnostics. So probably that's a short introduction from me. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. That's impressive achievements that you had during this short time of Biobank existence. So we will look forward to discussing more. So I would like to jump in because there's a lot of topics that we can discuss today, but we have a limited time. So to the first topic, the main topic of this event is business and biobank collaboration. Just short suggestion for other participants, for our listeners, that you can ask the questions in the comment section anytime, and I would redirect these questions to the speakers. We specifically now, during this extraordinary time of pandemics, we can see how this biobanks and businesses are collaboration is very important, and how it benefits to the advancement, to the development of healthcare innovations. So there's definitely a big change in current times in the role of biobanks. So I would like to ask Mark, could you share, because you had a long experience prior to pandemic and now, this from collaboration point of view with the businesses who develop specific solutions for healthcare, how do you see all these changes? What challenges you faced during this time before pandemic and now, for instance? Could you elaborate on this topic?
Yeah, of course, Agne. Right now, even though it's felt like a long time, we've been locked in this pandemic in different ways. It's still not that long. And to be very honest with you, I can't tell the difference in the way we interact with companies, for instance. And we do, and we have done for a long time, and there's nothing that prevents us legally from working with companies. But there are legal constraints to what we can do. And what I found from the past, and it's still the case today, most of the cases where we work with companies, it's to do with the company wanting to use one or other of our different technological services that can be very simple, like storing their clinical trial samples, through to some of our more advanced IT services to handle their data. Maybe even DNA extraction we can run for them. When it comes to use of samples within our biobank for things that companies want to do, the law, not surprisingly, has a lot to say about that. And to be very honest, at the moment, I think is somewhat restrictive. It's not easy for me to see in a Swedish context how we can easily share samples collected for one study with companies who might come and look at our catalog and think, oh yeah, I'd like to have access to these samples. It can happen, but it usually takes a long time, and depends on quite extensive negotiations between different principal investigators. And then we have to involve the lawyers to make sure we're doing everything correctly. That process itself, in my view, in Sweden today is not smooth enough.
It's basically based on regulations that are very restricted. Are these Swedish regulations or European regulations?
It's a mixture of both. And the regulations in themselves, I don't think there's anything wrong with them, or maybe there are small things wrong with them. Things like GDPR is a good thing for all of us. The problems come when different people choose to interpret them in different ways, or a lawyer recently corrected me. It isn't down to interpretation, it's down to how they get implemented. And these things are probably more to do with psychology and human nature than they are to do with the black and white text of the law, where some people in decision-making roles feel the need to interpret or implement those laws in a particularly strict or less strict way. We have a very good example with a prospective cohort that we started to build up in Sweden that was very much like the internationally known UK Biobank. The Swedish version of it was called LifeGene. The Swedish Data Inspection viewed LifeGene as being essentially an illegal activity because it had a kind of consent, a broad consent that the Swedish Data Inspection didn't agree with. That was a matter of opinion of professional people in authority roles, but nevertheless it was their opinion, and they had some power to try to close that study. Their power was limited because the Swedish government at the time didn't like what they did and created a new law to protect the ability of that study to continue. That whole story to me is a very example of a process that's not working optimally. The wheels are grinding, but they're not well lubricated. Some of those things have got a little bit easier, but there's still a long way to go. And I'm speaking now of a Swedish example in a Swedish context, but I have many contacts in my network in different countries, and this is similar. This is to do with us getting used to finding the right balance between personal integrity and society benefit. And then when it comes to interaction with businesses, the whole idea of a commercial interest also raises different reactions in different people.
It's mainly the question of bioethics in general, of the use of these samples for research or development of the products that industry performs. I would like to move this question to Michael as a representative from the industry and sharing this experience. You mentioned that most of biobank activities currently in Pelago Bioscience you had with Denmark rather than Sweden, but you use the access to the samples from biobanks rather than the technological services, or which part is more important, and where do you see the challenges as well? Is it that difficult, as Mark said, related to bioethics point of view?
Yeah, so we are a laboratory analysis service. So the normal way we operate with our customers is that we get, if it's ex vivo samples, we get it from the customer, but if sometimes we have to procure the samples ourselves, like if it's a blood sample or something, you can buy that by the liter more or less. But what is sometimes interesting is when it is a more advanced drug candidate, you want to see if it hits certain markers, etc. And that's why these more annotated samples are interesting, or disease-relevant samples are interesting. And exactly as Mark said, then it becomes more complicated. Because of yeah, I guess how people interpret the rules and regulations. The overarching purpose of drug discovery companies, of course, is to make money for their shareholders, but they do that by developing medicine for better human health. I'm probably influenced a lot by the fact that I worked in the industry for so long. So I view it through the lenses of someone with a commercial perspective. But to me, there isn't anything bad or wrong or unethical about having a business that develops drugs. It's just like having a business that develops bicycles. So to me, it's a bit unfortunate that the rules and regulations are so dependent on implementation and human psyche. But I guess that's the environment we work in. The specific example of us working with a Danish group, well, he was actually the one coordinating biobanking activities in the whole Nordic region for childhood leukemia samples, and therefore it was his clinic in Copenhagen which was the access point. So I think it was more a practical matter than not being able to work with. Well, it wouldn't have been Mark. It would probably have been someone at the hospital. But in any case, it was a better access point. So it was pure pragmatism from our side. But I think if access could be formalized, I mean, we also sometimes work with university platforms who have other lab services and technologies that we either can't afford ourselves in our labs or don't use that frequently, right? If we just want a price list, really, a price list and a set of rules to obey by, and then we'll order if possible. But again, this is the pragmatist talking. But if we could get to a situation like that, that'd be absolutely great, and then we could start procuring on behalf of our customers, rather than the customers trying to negotiate this field of biobanks.
Thank you. So as I understand, there's biobanks provide samples to universities for research, and businesses have a better access of samples working with universities as a research, like a contract research organization in academia field, rather than working together straight with biobanks at this point. It's a much easier model. Is that something that is happening? I will move to maybe Živile and ask her, is these bioethical questions a concern in Lithuania? Because there's a lot of research R&D companies in Lithuania that really are seeking for access of biobank samples, not just technological services, but samples specifically. And do you have any experience in collaboration, not just with universities, but with enterprises here in Lithuania?
Yes, you are right, because we have collecting samples. Some companies are looking for the samples. But today in Lithuania, I can tell we have no big experience to share with samples for biotechnological companies or pharmaceutical companies. But we have several projects with Lithuanian Biotechnological Company. One of them, and we did one project in research of some molecules for treatment of cancer. I think maybe now it was the problem before because we have no, haven't this law for biomedical research. Today we have this law, we are collecting the samples, but we maybe we are working everybody in our own institutions. If we are cancer, National Cancer Institute, we are working with our scientists, local, in local projects. Of course, we need for better collaboration between pharma, between pharmaceutical companies, between biotechnological companies. And I think this webinar also will help us to be more, more active maybe. I can tell maybe we need to be more active and look for this collaboration. And this pandemic, I also think, offer new possibilities. It is new ways for collaboration. Various educational seminars, online, webinars, workshops. I hope that modern scientific research like sequencing analysis, artificial intelligence will be also a great challenge and progress for the collaboration between biobanks, science and business. And I think, I hope maybe everything can move to some virtual research, virtual collaboration. How do you think, and how think other?
Yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah, I think that the speed of communication during this last year became much better, and
yes,
and a great
yes,
opportunity
exactly.
to use this advantage.
You just stay at home. You don't need to move to another country or somewhere. You can just speak face to face today, and yes, and make some collaboration activities.
And as from myself, I'm also more from an industry rather than academia. So I would really see a big benefit in discussing this issue of what Mark identified, this bioethical, or just finding a solution for these and answers for these questions that arise from biobanks and from businesses. And I think the benefit, the result might be much greater than just not to communicate about it. So this is a very important topic, I think. And I would like to ask Daniel, because I already heard about Daniel and the biobank they have in Santaros Clinic, their recent projects with businesses, but maybe you can share your experience and what do you see the challenges today in this field?
Okay, so first of all, the differences between collaborations before pandemic and right now. So there is a huge difference because right now we have a lot more collaborations. So it's a good thing. Yeah. Before pandemic, we had only few collaborations with business. I believe that one of the most successful ones was with, and still is, with Lithuanian startup Droplet Genomics, where we are researching hemo-oncological diseases at fundamental and applied science levels, which means our collaborations results not only with scientific publication, but also in a perfect case scenario, with new methodologies in diagnosing leukemia and predicting outcomes of different chemotherapies. And at the same time, our collaborations helps company with optimizing their innovation and applying it in real life. But during pandemic, it was amazing to see how many different Lithuanian companies were willing to collaborate with the Biobank. For example, collaboration with Immunodiagnostica and Lithuanian startup Santaros on creating and optimizing new serological tests to detecting COVID-19 antibodies, which were made using antigens that were also synthesized in another Lithuanian company, Biobanks. Also collaboration with academia like Vilnius University Life Sciences Center, together with a company like Diagnolita, our collaboration resulted in optimizing, as I said, pooling PCR, and collaboration with bigger companies like Thermo Fisher Scientific, which our collaboration started by sequencing SARS-CoV-2 genome, and now it grows to even bigger and more scientific projects. As of the challenges, I think that right now in Lithuania we have a few challenges. The one is that biobanking is still a new thing in Lithuania. It is relatively new, and most companies probably haven't even heard about biobanking field. Yeah, and another one, as everyone mentioned, is that companies are not familiar with the bioethics law and therefore are somehow scared. And that's why I think that collaborations during pandemic really helped to share awareness, like that biobanks can help with bioethics, can help and give advices on how to get bioethic approval and how to make better collaborations. Yeah, so I think that these two are the biggest problems right now.
Okay, thank you. Now there's a great news that so many projects were moving forward, and I think that everyone is gaining experience in Lithuania in this field during the last year. And I wanted to jump to another topic and discuss with a more broader scope. We talked about samples as such, the access to them. We talked about the services that biobanks provide. But there's a very interesting and very important topic related to collection of big data, yes, or in general, the data related to these samples, to these, as it was already mentioned by Michael, annotation of the samples had a big value as well. So all these data is really important in such fields as personalized medicine and precision medicine that mentioned by Mark. And it's really a field that industry is moving really fast. And our biobanks in pace with this, and specifically if there's still a problem related to regulations and sharing of specific data, what can be done to make it more efficient, and how can we use this data and create these very innovative solutions in healthcare? Mark, maybe you could.
Thank you, Agni. Yes, these are really important questions. I wish I had really simple or quick answers or black and white answers. I don't think we're in the biobanking world, but actually in our general world, I don't think we're really ready for this yet. I don't mean that we should stop it or in any way stop planning and thinking of ideas, but easy access to wide, rich data in the medical sphere is demanding, is challenging from a bioethical point of view. Having said that, there are rich databases of that kind of information, and I think you have to collaborate really broadly. One really good one I mentioned before is the UK Biobank. They've collected samples and data from 500,000 UK citizens. They've started genotyping, started all sorts of imaging, and they're making this data available. And they're able to do it because they've put it in a framework, a very good technical anonymization or pseudonymization within a legal framework in the UK that enables them to do that, to be able to share data internationally. With what we do in Sweden in my biobank, we don't have that kind of possibility. We do, however, have ways to access data where you set up individual collaborations with researchers. A really nice example we have in Sweden is the Swedish Twin Register, where we have twins going back to the 50s with samples and data. I think it's about 25,000 Swedish twins where we have samples and in some cases quite significant lifestyle data where they filled in questionnaires. And these can be accessible, but not in definitely not in a kind of AI type of way where you just set off an algorithm and it does analyses for you. It takes a lot of tailor-made setting up of collaborations and contracts.
But I see it as a very big advantage of countries or biobanks that are moving towards to this direction, and they moving towards to access of this data in any case. So I think that's someone who can advance very fast in this field. And I wanted to, because we have some questions from the audience, and I related to this collecting big data, I wanted to ask regarding collaboration, networking with other biobanks, because this is what Michael mentioned when with his experience that like the Nordic biobanks working together, and this networking definitely exists. And I want to just to ask maybe from Lithuanian, Živile, maybe you could share, do Lithuanian biobanks are included in the networks? How does it work, and how beneficial it is for biobanks?
Yes, I can tell from our experience and how me and Daniel mentioned before, usually nobody knows about some small hospital-based biobanks or small country biobanks. And of course, we need to be more and more visible. So for that, we need to be members of some international networks. But I can tell also that this becoming of members of international networks depends on your own activity. Yes, it is really works. And when you came to some international biobanking conferences, yes, you can meet people, you can meet responsible persons, you can talk face-to-face again and ask about joining one or another networks. And yes, after this, active discussions, active sending of letters and explaining to your institutions, you can become member of one or another networks. So today, National Cancer Institutes are involved in several networks. So in IARC network biobank, it is in Lyon, and also in a ESBB network. So we are members of two networks like institutional biobanks. And again, I can tell about our new and biggest project now in Lithuania. So this project is Human Biological Resource Center. And the main aim of this project was to integrate into BBMRI ERIC network. In this project participate all biggest hospitals from Vilnius and Kaunas cities. It is at our National Cancer Institute and Vilnius University Santaros clinics, Biobanks, and Lithuanian Bioscience University and clinics. Also Center of Innovative Medicine in Vilnius, and both universities, Vilnius University and Kaunas University. So as I thought, the main aim is to integrate to the BBMRI ERIC. But second aim, and maybe the task of this project, is to create national biobank. And with this integration to BBMRI ERIC, our Lithuanian national biobank, I hope, will be more visible in the world. And so I hope that this our project will be finished successfully, and Europe and maybe world will hear about our possibilities, about our sample storing and integration to the international collaboration.
That's great news. Thank you, Živile, for sharing. And I wanted to ask Michael, do you think that, well, in case of big data collection, definitely these clusters or national banks or international banks data, it has of great value. For instance, if we talk about genome sequencing, yes, so some countries have are collecting a lot of data on that, and some countries may, smaller ones wouldn't be able to collect as much as they can. But this networking collaboration, connecting this this information, is that it's of course very far for the future, but would businesses, for instance, today, do they benefit from for instance, just they work with one institution, one biobank, or working with a network of them increases the chances, likelihood to move forward with the research and the creation of the products?
Well, of course, larger sample collections is interesting. I mean, our computing abilities increases, but I mean, yes, AI in all honesty, but crap in, crap out. So again, the annotation, I think, is really, really important. Mark talked about the twin register, etc. So AI, it's pattern recognition, and I'm sure these networks, when I was younger, it was called machine learning, are getting better and better at finding patterns that we can't see ourselves. But again, if we can't guide these machine networks or the AI in what success looks like, and what is useful annotation, so that we don't end up with noise or exploring irrelevant parameters, then I don't think access to larger sample networks is going to benefit us that much. But so from that standpoint, I think still the most important thing is if we from the industry side can get I said it before, but a price list and a set of rules to follow, then we will. But on this data, Mark talked about live gene, you talked about PCR, you talked about sequencing. Except for a very few number of monogenetic diseases, all other diseases are malfunctions of proteins. So please, all of you out there in the biobanks, do not forget about the proteins. Sequencing, in all honesty, yeah, that's the blueprint. But if the architect doesn't mount the doors exactly as the doors are supposed to be, you're going to have a drafty house. So don't forget about proteins and proteomics when we talk about disease. And yes, if we can have access to annotated samples also on what does the proteins look like. And I'm not talking just about abundance, I'm talking about functionality profiling of proteins in these samples with a price list and a set of rules to follow. Then we can sit in our offices and have the machines think out the right experiments to do in the lab.
I think, yes, that's a very good point. And I think that maybe one of the key questions is whether biobanks face the need of the industry at the moment, because as I understand, biobanks mostly work with academia, with the universities, researchers, but addressing the needs of the industry might be because of these regulation things that are not addressed. But I want to ask Daniel, because I've been talking to him lately, and the focus on what, for instance, local industry needs are pretty much of a focus in Biobank and Santaros Klinikos. Am I right or not, Daniel?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Okay, so the industry has its needs, specific needs, looking from the data or samples from biobanks, and how biobanks are facing these needs is probably one of the key points of successful collaboration, if we're looking from the point of industry. So I know there are some good examples of the strategic or logical way of how your biobank works. So could you share, please, if that's how can biobanks keep in pace on the needs of, for instance, industry, who are the ones that are developing products, innovations in healthcare?
Yeah, so actually right now the needs are pretty big, and industries and universities want a lot of huge amount of samples and with huge amount of data, of course. And as we know that collecting big data is probably an issue right now, because most obvious challenge for me and probably for most European biobanks and researchers and companies is the compliance with the GDPR and finding compromise whenever human genome, transcriptome or proteomics can lead to identify a person. There is still unknown, like what part of the data can identify a person, where does bioethics have to say stop, you can't share that data. So there is still not clear which data can identify a person. And as I said, industry also wants a lot of data. Even probably right now, more companies are more interested in data than samples, because the different artificial intelligence techniques and all the IT upgrades. So definitely most of the some of the Lithuanian and most of the European companies are interested in data from the biobank. And yeah, and about big data, I believe that in the near future, biobanking field will have much bigger demand of data scientists than lab technicians. So probably that would be my answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. I would like to go to the questions that we have from our listeners today, and we have really few of them. And I would like to start with the Antanas Montvila question about cooperation. So Živile already answered the cooperation related to Lithuanian biobanks, but maybe Mark, could you just tell us, do biobanks cooperate in Sweden and share data on a national level?
Thank you, Agni. Yes, I saw Antanas' question there. I can answer it very straightforwardly. Yes, we do. We've now set up a national organization called Biobank Sweden, where the 7 regions cooperate pretty actively. we do share data on a national level, but it's all very case-by-case basis with specific studies. At the moment, we're all working on together a national study in cardiovascular research that's collected samples from 5,000 volunteers in each of the 6 regions, I mean. And we're sharing the samples and the data and trying to do that in a coordinated way. Yes, I think that was
there's an additional one related to Sweden, so I will ask as well from Juozas Kupčinskas, who asked, how does Sweden deal with linking clinical phenotype data with biobank samples? He thinks that it's a huge bottleneck in biobank.
Yes, the way it's done with here in Sweden is usually very much on a case-by-case basis and depends on the, let's say, the skill and knowledge of the principal investigator, knowing which contracts to set up to get access to the data in a secure and ethical way. So it happens, but it is very much a kind of tailor-made thing, case by case. Several times in our webinar, I've talked about the bioethical challenges, and a lot of the time I see them as frustrations where we haven't set up things in a very optimal way. I also think all the time about the license to operate that we get from the people who donate samples to us, whether they're patients or healthy volunteers. If we do anything stupid with their samples or data that disappoints them or hurts them, then we lose our ability, our right, our credibility to do this kind of thing. So we have to treat these bioethical aspects with the greatest respect. And while we try and improve the processes, we always need to remember where the integrity burden has to lie.
So we have a lot of questions. I would really like to address them. And Povilas Zarajas is asking, how do you solve challenge when integrating data internally from multiple data sources and share between institutions and companies? So we are back to the data. This is a really important topic from Biobank, as Daniel already mentioned. And are there any standard or processes that you wish to be implemented to accelerate such activities? So can anyone who would like to go and answer this, because this is an interesting question, but very specific.
Maybe I can tell only about our project and this planning, what all data from e-health history, from other registries will be integrated in this biobanking IT system. But everything, of course, it is in our plans, and we are working on this and data standardization of data and integration of all data into Biobank IT system. And also, I see Professor Arvydas Laurinavičius. I think it is not question, but maybe some explanation. What we plan to do with digital pathology, also integrating of digital pathology and radiological some views, also integration into Biobank, and it will be like one big virtual also Biobank.
That's a very interesting project. We're looking forward to it. Daniel, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I would like to comment only. The main thing that could strengthen the collaborations and sample data collection is combined national-wide database between biobanks and in Lithuania. And right now, as Živilė mentioned, we are creating such a database. And as long as most of the Lithuanian hospitals has medical history, like electronic medical history, so it is easier to combine the data, and creating such a database is right now one of our main objects in National Biobank project that Živilė mentioned.
But do you consider together solving the problem of sharing this data? Is there a discussion on working with regulators and how to do that?
Yes, there is a huge discussion between which data we can share, which data we want to share with other biobanks. So the main thing that right now that we have a minimal data that we have to share, and that minimal data is set by BBMRI Eric, and also other Lithuanian biobanks and our partners are willing to share a little bit more data, but we are still discussing what kind of data we are be sharing together. We will be combining in one national biobanking database.
Okay, so we see Eva Bernardina comment rather than a question that some private biobanks are active in promotion and getting requests from industry. I don't think that private biobanks are an option in Lithuania, but I think that it's maybe related to other countries. I'm not sure. Maybe in Sweden you have private biobanks who specifically seeks then some of samples from national biobanks. Is that a model, Mark?
It's not so well known in Sweden.
Okay.
I don't think there are many, if there are any, but such private biobanks do exist. Several in the US, of course, and in Canada.
Yeah, so I think that in Europe, like in Lithuania, it's not an issue, and if it's in Sweden, it's not an issue. So I understand the ethical issues that Eva is wanting to address, but I don't see that as a problem in our countries. But if we're talking back again about ethical parts, ethics of sharing data or samples with the industry. So there's, of course, as we discussed previously, a communication is very important, and maybe at some point, like in some research, like preclinical studies or clinical trials, you can encrypt some data. You don't need too much of identification, and I think that a communication. I'm now moving to the third topic today. The communication between stakeholders in any case is very important. Whether it's a social communication, talking to the patients that donate their samples to biobanks to understand what they are doing, and communication between the biobanks and the industry and the researchers, even communication with the regulators to identify these, not to stop at some point. So if you could share, just because we're coming to the end of this webinar, I'm sure unfortunately we don't have enough time to discuss all the questions, but if you could, as a closing remark, share your views on how can we improve the communication, which key things, like just 1, 2, or 3, you would like to emphasize that we should move forward in order to increase the effectiveness of new processes, the new product development in healthcare. So let's start with Mark. That was a long introduction to the question.
I'll try and keep my answer fairly short. For me, one of the things I want to spend more time on communication with is communicating more externally. We spend a lot of time communicating internally within our biobanks and maybe within our national networks, but still it's rather inward looking. It struck me that for us, for my biobank, I want to start looking outwards. We did a pilot test at the beginning of this year, fortunately before the pandemic hit us, with something we called a community advisory board. This was something we'd seen that Mayo Clinic Biobank did. It's been doing it for 12 years, and their community advisory board is simply a a panel of about 15 to 20 members of the local public who are invited in every month to hear a little bit about the biobank and what it's doing and the studies it's doing, and then offer their opinions or concerns. This is a good way to communicate out to the general public about what we do, why we do it, and the big benefits of it. At the same time as listening to what they view about us. I think that's an important aspect of external communication that I then want to use to communicate with lawmakers and funding agencies to try and make sure that we get the bioethical processes much smoother, and also that we gain more funding for this activity, that because most of it is in the public sector, it's always chronically underfunded. Yet now, when we're starting to see the massive benefits it can have on saving healthcare costs, it's worth investing more. So communicating that way is to those external stakeholders is important for me. Daniel, you mentioned communicating so that companies know about what we're doing. I also agree with you that we could do that better.
Thank you, Mark. I think that communication in between banks in different countries is also are very beneficial. And I would like to facilitate a follow-up maybe call with the biobanks in Lithuania and in Sweden, because I see in the comment section also Professor Lovinavičius is also having questions, and I think that Daniel Živilė as well, and other biobanks in Lithuania, that really a good discussion, an open discussion with these very easy now communication tools that we have, and possibilities can really happen. So I would like to just encourage to do a follow-up and do this in between biobanks as well, a short discussion. Michael, what do you think? Let's move to how can we improve this collaboration? What do you think would be beneficial?
Yeah, so I understand that my comments are probably a bit naive. I fully take Mark's point on it only takes one mistake and then you rob the whole trust of the system, that someone does something bad with the data. But what I'm thinking is we have or at least the drug development companies have so much experience in conducting clinical trials and how to protect that data. So maybe we could use some of the same encryption security type software like we have the blockchain technology, or how we have digital fingerprints that yeah, you can look at the data, but you will only get the encryption key unlocked if you, and then there's a contract negotiation rather than I don't know, I'm sure these one-on-one solutions that you have with the PIs when you connect clinical phenotypic data with access to biobank data, that gets complicated and very case by case and uses a lot of effort. But if there could be some sort of this is the rules, and you now sign away of all your responsibility. If you get access to our data, this is what you have to do, and it's on the individual maybe. Blockchain secured, a digital signature. And then then the biobank has done what it could to make sure that the bioethics are followed, and then it's back to the customer, to us, if we were the one that signed something. I don't know if it's feasible at all, but whatever can be done, and maybe more co-financing from the potential customers if you're chronically underfinanced, not as part of the taxes, but the customer, the commercial organizations that would also benefit from your activities. Membership fee.
I completely agree with. There's a need. You can find an answer on a solution how to operate so it would be efficient enough and safe enough to operate. So I agree with Michael. I really am behind him and saying yes, let's do this, because we definitely specifically with big data is just coming up and will grow and grow. So I think that the adaptation is a necessary thing. Živile, what would be your closing remarks on this topic today? We cannot hear you, Živile. Could you unmute?
Yes. So once again, I would like to thanks to inviting me to this discussion. And I think for our biobanks, yes, we need to be more visible. So for that, we need to be more active. And of course, benefit must be for both sides, and for biobanks and for industry. Biobanks maybe need to know what kind of samples we need to prepare for this industry, and maybe every day, every year, asking again, what plans is for industry? What can we help? And what kind of samples, what quality, and how many samples you need to be prepared from our biobanks. I think, yes, very close collaboration and very close communication must be every day, every week maybe, and every month with biobanks and industry.
Thank you, Živile. Daniel, what would you close this discussion? What do you see beside communication? Maybe addressing the needs of this big data. I see that you could just some of the questions are very focused on that, and you were right. Like there's a big need from Lithuanian companies on that. So how do you see this communication in improving?
I think right now, as long as we are still newbies in this field with Živile, we are still new and small biobanks, but we are growing strong. I think that external communications is the key point for us, and we can learn from the more experienced brothers and sisters from abroad, from Sweden biobanks and other biobanks. And so we really need to improve external communication. And how to do it? I think it is simple. We need to make more similar webinars like this one, and that way we'll be more visible and we will find contacts, more friends, and we will grow stronger.
That's perfect. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for finding time to join this seminar and discuss your experience. Thank you, participants, for listening and asking questions. Really looking forward for any other discussions. I see that this biobanking topic is very on top, and we definitely would like to continue that. And thank you, organizers, Enterprise Lithuania and the Embassy of Sweden to Lithuania, as well as Biotechnology Association, for organizing such a discussion. And thank you all, and hope to see you all soon. Stay healthy and negative, as Dinah mentioned at the beginning. So thank you and goodbye.